Thank you so much for joining the Hybrid Remote Center of Excellence. I'm Nola Simon and I'm the host. And joining me today is someone that actually worked for the same company I used to work, but she now has her own company called the Fusion Group. Her name's Jen Warrington. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It's exciting.
It is. It was funny. She joined and I'm like, okay, we immediately start talking about technology. Like we've known each other forever and we've really only interacted on LinkedIn and had this chat. But hey, if you heard the beginning of our conversation, you'd never know. We'd never actually spoken in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We have some commonalities, right?
We do have some commonalities, exactly. And so I'll tell you a little sneak peek about how we actually connected. As I mentioned, we worked for the same company, but we'd never known because John was actually in recruiting. My background was actually in like customer service, sales, right? Never
Mhm.
actually interacted, but we were connected on LinkedIn. Now, Jen was actually restructured at the beginning of the pandemic because that happened. It happened to my cousin. She was a recruiter a few weeks into the pandemic and talent acquisition was hit. And it happened at so many different companies, including the one we were at, right? Being a blessing because you started your own company. That's where the origin of your own company has come. Uh, and that has been one of those stories that's been incredibly positive. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your perspective, how that actually fell out for you?
Yeah. So I think for me, as I had shared, I was really content where I was. I really enjoyed the work that I was doing as a recruiter and had tenure underneath me to a certain degree inside of that. And so I had always wanted to go on my own, but I really didn't know what that was going to look like. And then again, when I was weighing the pros and cons of what would I do and what would that look like, I was in a really comfortable position of I had a decent salary. I had a lot of flexibility. I was doing work from home before work from home was the thing. I probably started that back in 2014, at least on a part-time basis. So it was like, did this really make sense? And not really knowing all the pieces of the puzzle. And then as the company that we were with, they had gone through a number of over the years acquisitions of other companies. And so that always led to restructuring. And so I made it through three. I didn't make it through four. And it lined up that I found out before like COVID was happening in the background, but it wasn't something that was like in the news every day. And then all the other things that we went through. So I found out the day after Family Day of 2020 that my role was being impacted as a result of the global restructure and that I was finishing March 31st, 2020. So it'll be 3 years ago in a couple of days. And I was shocked. I was a little taken aback. I really didn't think that the role that I had was going to be impacted because we were a large organization that had a global presence. Therefore, hiring was always happening. And then once I got my bearings about me and thought, okay, let's look at this and what's going to be next. I knew very quickly I was doing something on my own. I didn't know what that was going to look like right out of the gate, but I thought this is my window of opportunity because the world was shut down at this point. Like by the time I finished the end of March, everything was shut down. We were all at home. I had the kids here who were 12 and 6 at that time in that sense. So I was like, I know it's going to be something. I don't know exactly what it is, but I thought I'll use the duration that I had severance for to just figure out what's important to me and what do I want to do? Because I'm a very firm believer in those things can create momentum for you when you're tripling down on what you're good at versus trying to put yourself into how do I get better at something else? It really came from what I felt like I said, I was blindsided. I really wasn't expecting it at all. I'd made it through three. Why wouldn't I make it through four? And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I've got 5 weeks left. What's going to happen? So I did a lot of self reflection and I did a lot of like, how do I be honest with myself? Because if I am going to start something, I need to make sure that I'm doing something that I love to do. And I knew it was going to be something with regards to people and recruiting, but it was just a matter of figuring out how do I make that make sense? And the catalyst was, okay, your role is ending in 5 weeks and here's severance and you're off to the races kind of thing. So it was the catalyst, but it's been such an epic experience. And like I said to you at the beginning, you also often think, why didn't I do this before? And I don't necessarily know that it wouldn't have been as successful. I'm sure it could have been, but I think the timing lined up really well. And at that point, I had 15 years in recruitment that I could at least have that foundation behind me no matter what it was that I did. And so I started the Fusion Group 6 months later, and we focus on recruiting, but we focus on recruiting in a different way. So for those that know recruitment externally, it's more of we find you the person, you're hiring sales rep, we bring you some resumes and you interview them and you hire them, and that's great. We do it from a more holistic approach because I do have the corporate internal recruitment where there was collaboration and strategy and like figuring out all these other different pieces. So we come in as like, how do we create an employer brand? How do we attract, hire, and retain? Because you can say it's really hard to find people, and it is, but it's also really hard to retain people if you don't have a strong culture and employer brand. So we focus on those pieces. And then the other pillar of the business has been career strategy and helping people figure out what do you want to do with the skills that you have? How do you find new work? If you can't find it, how do you create it? How do you potentially start your own business and things like that? So it's been an awesome 3 years, and it's been really busy, and it's making an impact not only I believe in the lives of the people that we're working with, but it's just been I'm happy every day, right? I never feel like I'm working. So that's been a big gift for me.
Yeah, and it's funny because I tracked your progress on because you were my canary in the coal mine, right? When it started happening, because it's like when I started realizing what was happening in talent and in HR in general, I was like, okay, the storytelling was falling apart because we were
Hmm.
hearing everybody's safe. We worried about you. We're concerned about you. We're going to make sure everything's okay. And it's just like, but are you? Because I know it's her because I was super connected on LinkedIn. And so it made me step back and go, okay, what's happening here? And so by the time I was actually restructured in December, I was prepped because I knew it was happening to other people. So
Right.
when you talk about that having the time and the space really to step back and reflect, that's the gift that was for me too. And it's hard to see it as a gift when it first initially happens. But
Yep.
having that space to be able to step back and assess, that's really where I started this consulting business, where it's okay. The most meaningful, impactful work that I ever did was really employee advocacy and build up hybrid remote and design that, right? I
Hmm.
knew it could be a through line because at that point I had 10 years of experience doing that.
Right.
That's where
Hmm.
it's like, that's what I did with the time that I had. And in a lot of ways, we tracked parallel because I was restructured in December and you started in December, right? The business somewhere around there?
I no, the business started September the 8th of 2020.
Oh, okay. So a little bit.
Yeah, because I was 6 months from when I finished to when I could start. And
Yeah.
so I
But
was
I remember
probably just then
you just kind of
hammering it.
exploded.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
inspiring to see because, um, like, it's how do you yeah, certain things happen and you don't necessarily plan, but it's like, what can you do with what you presented with? Because it's
Yeah.
a reality and it's a pivot, and then to
Hmm.
see how you made that work for you is really inspiring. So, how did you craft your business? Did you start with the mission and the vision and, like, the values? What was your strategy behind it?
I so at the beginning, it was I'm a notebook junkie. Like I have notebooks everywhere. If I open this cupboard back here, because we're on Zoom as we're doing this, you would see notebooks, notebooks, notebooks. So I had tons of notebooks, and then I went and bought a blank one. And I didn't go into the mission and the values at that point, but I was really like, look, what do I want to do? And what am I good at? And what would be something that at that point, it was how do I just replace the income I've lost so that our lifestyle does not change? That was the main thing. And then as I started to, again, we weren't going anywhere, right? Like we're all at home. And so while the kids were off doing their thing and staying busy, and my husband did go to work because he's a police officer. So he didn't, but like they weren't impacted. They still went. I had a lot of quiet time to I read a lot and I journaled a lot. And I thought, if I get to do this and I could do anything, right? Which is the $1 million question, right? If you could do anything and time and money weren't an issue, what would it be? And I thought, I loved my job, and like I said, I was very content. So I was like, how do I get people to love what they do? So it started there. And then I reflected on as a recruiter, I knew that I could go out and I could either recruit on my own or I could recruit for another business and I would be fine. But it was more for me about how do I get people excited about working again? Because COVID did change. And at that point, I wouldn't have really known. But in hindsight, COVID changed the landscape. Like, there's nobody that wasn't affected by COVID, whether it was your job or your income or whatever. Like everybody was impacted and everyone has a COVID story. That's going to be like the history of for our generations, right? And so I thought, like, how do I get people to be excited about the work that they do, especially if they're going to make a change? And over the years that I had done recruiting, people were always reaching out saying, can you look at my resume for me? Or I've got an interview coming up, not necessarily with the company that we work for, but anywhere. Just can I pick your brain? Can you help me with this? And I thought, if all of these people in the world are being impacted to the degree that they are and are either going, I'm not going back to a job that I wasn't appreciated at, or I didn't love, or didn't pay me enough, or what have you, or, oh my gosh, I lost a job. I'm going to figure something else. I thought, how do I go in there and go, now is the time to take inventory and stock of who are you? What do you like? What do you want to do? And then how do we package that all together so you can go find the next thing and feel like, again, COVID became the blessing, right? And so while my restructure wasn't part of the pandemic, it ended up overlapping inside of that. So I use that as an opportunity to say, how can I help not pay it forward, but how can I help bring that to people and say, we can figure this out? And then from there, my I talked a lot with my dad, who was basically at that point semi retired. And he said, there's somebody that you should talk to that might be able to help you as you're trying to figure out these pieces. And so I met this lady virtually, and we had a great conversation about. I was enthusiastic. I was like, I'm going to take on the world, and I'm going to disrupt recruitment, and I'm going to do all these things. And I don't know if it scared her or it inspired her, but she said she was like, love your energy. Let's keep the conversations going. But essentially, she had a program as a consultant that I went through to help me figure out what was it that I was going to do and what was going to be important to me. And then the mission and values that would have been established through that work in 2020 are very different than what I feel they are today
Oh,
because of the
interesting.
evolution of the business. So and I'd have to go back and look for sure, but I think that at the beginning the mission was to match great talent with great organization. And then my values were really around like communication and having clarity and credibility. And while those are so important, I'm really in today, the mission for me is to create as much impact as possible because I know that if someone loves what they're doing, the domino effect of that or the ripple effect of that, it can be extremely inspiring and life changing for others around them. And they're going to want to do the same thing. Like you do it first. And if it works out good, I'm going to follow along. Whereas otherwise we'll just all stick together. And then I look at the values that I would say we have now, and there's a lot around authenticity. There's a lot about still creating that impact and being strategic. But I talk to people, and whether it's on the recruitment side or it's on the career strategy side, who are like, oh, I've worked with a recruiter before, and it didn't really go so well. And I'm like, this is going to be totally different. So we're a differentiator and we're a disruptor. And one of the values is that we are doing everything we can to disrupt what the stereotypical mindset is around working with a recruiter or working with a career coach. And to the point that some of the feedback or testimonials, if you will, that we're getting are like, it's really like life-changing stuff, which sounds so cheesy, but at the same time, watching that impact happen for people has really shifted our alignment in terms of, okay, how do we just keep replicating this and giving this to more and more people inside of that? And that's really what's pushing us forward now as we're like, we'll be 3 full years starting year 4 in September.
So to me, it sounds that you're really supercharging the idea of getting people to work in flow and intrinsic motivation, job crafting so that they're doing more of what they love and less of what they don't
Yes.
love.
Yeah.
And you've created a business that's basically like several podcast episodes come to life. Because I talked to
Probably.
Roxy Van about intrinsic motivation and Rob Baker about job crafting and then personalization. His book is actually called Personalization of Work. So really what you're doing is you're teaching people to personalize. And then my coach is actually Carrie Twig, and she has a book actually about career stories. And that's really
Okay.
what you're doing is you're supercharging people's careers using their own personal stories to
Yeah,
bring it
absolutely.
doing. And so I'm like, this is why I wanted to talk to you about this because to me, it's like you've created a business pulling through all of these different aspects that I've been talking to people about, and you've made a success with that. And it's really incredible to see,
Thank you.
especially now that you're celebrating like 3 years of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the really exciting thing for me was, which in the beginning probably didn't feel, but it was, oh, this is not the time. We're in the middle of the pandemic. You
Mm.
like, I was so when I very first started recruiting, I was in sales. So I lived in Toronto. I actually worked for a financial advisor in Toronto. I moved back home to Halifax. And when I moved back home, I went to a staffing agency. I was like, I need to find a job. And they ultimately ended up hiring me to do business development for them. So I would go out and talk to the businesses and say, this is why you should use a staffing agency. This is how we do it. This is why we're different, all of those things. And then when the client or the business would say, yes, let's do it, it would be handed over to a recruiter.
Mm.
So sales was always my background. And then the recruiter that I would give the work to, I don't remember if she went off because she was ill or if she was vacation, but there was a time where she was off for, I'm going to call it 2 months. And the salesperson in me was saying to my branch manager, if I'm bringing this business in and there's no recruiter to fill it, how am I getting paid? So you need to teach me how to find it. Like I've got that part down, but now you have to teach me how to recruit so I can fill the business as well. And then ultimately created that kind of a role that I was business development on one portion of the week or the month or whatever. And then as the roles came in, then I was finding the candidates for it. So it again was one of those things that evolved naturally. But once I got that part of it, I was like, oh, I really like this. Like it was matchmaking and putting the puzzles together and making those things make sense. So I knew that as I came into agency world, then I went corporately and I was corporate longer than I was with agency world. But the beautiful part about that is knowing how both sides work and internal recruitment. So I'm an employee of X company and I only hire for that company versus external recruiter who is, I've got 10 companies that I'm hiring for. Knowing how both sides of that worked, I was like, what's the good in this one and what's the good in that one? And how do I bring them together? Which is how we ultimately came up with Fusion Group in that regard, right? Like we're going to bring together. Yeah. And also at the time, my dad was very integral in helping. My dad's an accountant. And so we co-founded the Fusion Group together. So again, it was bringing kind of father, daughter, semi-retired, but still doesn't feel like he wants to be retired. So he was doing kind of some of his own things and I'm helping look after the business. And we brought all of those things together and go, let's look at everything and what is really good. We're going to bring it like highlight and what's not so great, or we would want to change. We're going to leave it to the side and figure it out later. And so that has allowed us to, I think, grow quickly. I think it's also allowed people who come to work with us and seeing that the model we're using with them, we use with ourselves has really gained credibility inside of that, which I think has made a huge difference in terms of there's a lot of staffing firms out there. There are a lot of staffing firms and 95%, because at the beginning, as I was planning what I was going to do, I couldn't promote that I was doing it because of the restrictions around the severance package, which I totally respected and stayed within the boundaries of that. But then, like you said, it blew up on LinkedIn because then I was out there going, okay, every day I could post, but I didn't go into it going, I need to have a marketing budget and I need someone who's going to help me do all these things. And to this day, 95% of our business is referral,
That's incredible. That's incredible.
right?
Yeah. And
It's bananas to me.
I didn't actually know about your dad being involved. I don't know, that part of the story didn't stick out to me, but that it kind of,
Slightly on the
yeah.
sides, just from the fact that he's at a different stage of his career in the
Yes.
sense of, but he was very instrumental in helping us to figure out, okay, what are we going to do? Brought some of the right people in to have those conversations and then be able to go back and say, okay, like we have a lot of accounting rules, for example, right now that we're hiring for, and he will review resumes if we need it. He'll give us insight if we need that. He wants to be really helpful in that regard. And at the time that we started, he wasn't ready to completely wind down to retirement, even though at 74 now, we were like, go enjoy life, go to Florida or go to your cottage or do whatever. But he's really enthusiastic about this because I think at the beginning, right, you're like, the people around you that love you the most are like, oh, that feels risky, right? Oh, maybe you should just take that job because, and this was a roundabout way to it, when I found out, I posted it on LinkedIn, thanking everybody and I was finished and all of those different things. And the very first branch manager at the staffing agency that hired me to do business development reached out and said, when's your severance done? You can start the next day. You can run them on branches. My family was very much, that's probably the safer bet. Like it's salary, it's stability. And I was like, I just worked somewhere for 10 years and bing, bang, boom, I was done. I don't believe in that 9 to 5 stability type thing. I had a really hard time wrapping my brain around that. So I politely declined and told him I was going on my own. So he said, so now we're going to be competitive to each other. And I was like, maybe to you, but I'm going different. I'm going rogue on everybody and doing it completely different. And I think that's what we've done. And that's why it's worked. But family at the beginning is very much, oh, this feels scary. It's a pandemic. You've got two small kids, this. And now I think if we ask them that question, they would be like, holy smokes, like, why didn't you not do this sooner?
Yeah, exactly. And it's oftentimes the fear of the unknown that kind of keeps you stuck in the story that you already
Yeah.
know.
And
And
it's
it's
other people's stories too.
other people's
Because,
stories. Yeah.
and I say this truly humbly, but also one thing about me is that I am very self aware of myself and I try to be very authentic. I knew that I didn't need a plan B, C all the way through Z. I knew that this was going to work because I was not having, but I knew it. But that didn't mean that other people could. Again, you can't see it. It's not happening. It's an idea in a notebook, right? And
Yes.
it's like, but I knew it would be okay. Did I think it would be what it is already today? No, I didn't. But I knew that I was going to be just fine. I really did. I thought it was only going to ever be me, but now I have two team members that work for me. I really only thought that the first maybe 5 years it would just still be me, and that was okay. And I hired my first person within a year.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah,
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about, let's back it up to the
sure.
way that you run the business because you are 100% remote. So people that you've hired, they're working remotely as well too.
They are. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, when I worked corporately, like I said, I was working from home at least 3 days a week since probably my daughter was born in 2014. So probably the year or two before that, we were starting to pilot some of that. And I was servicing clients in terms of business units across Canada. And I did a lot of hiring for that were essentially sales positions that those individuals were also working out of their home. So I have been working from home, I'm going to call it since 2012 in that regard, at least 60% of the time. So I knew going into this that I wasn't going to go get office space. No matter how big we get, I'm not going to get office space. And for me, it is, I feel that I do better at home because I've got the flexibility that if I have to go because the kids are sick and I've got to run out, I'm close to the school. If I need to go out for an appointment, I can do that. And I've got the flexibility in my day. And again, the foundation was crafted through the company I was with before because I was balancing time zones and all kinds of different things. So I knew going into it that one, I thought it was only going to ever just be me. So why would I need office space? But then two, when I hired Lindsay, who works on my team, which is also an epic story of how that came to be because she's crushing it and it's amazing. She lives an hour from me. So she lives outside. So I'm in Halifax and she lives about an hour outside the city. And again, our conversation evolved very authentically, very fluidly. I went out that night and then I was like, I'm going to hire her. And then circled back around and reached back out to her. And then here we are almost 2 years later. And so I said, there is no office. So you have to be comfortable. And Lindsay had a hospitality background. So she was face to face with people all the time.
Mm.
She was the assistant manager at a very busy restaurant in Halifax before she moved outside the city. So we had to have conversations just to make sure that was going to work for her in that regard. But I said, it's work from home. I'm super flexible. If you need to go to the doctor's appointment at 2 o'clock, like you go. The expectation is that recruiting is a lot like real estate in the sense of if someone reaches out to you and says, hey, Jen, we have a role for you to hire and it's urgent, I'm taking the call at 7 o'clock at night. I'm checking the email. And so, not that I wanted her to be tied to her computer or her phone, but just know that to get that flexibility that people are craving, there's going to be trade offs. And so, some nights there might be a late night, some nights there's not, but we do. So, we're fully remote. And we do Monday through Thursday, our core hours are 8:30 to 4:30, and Fridays are half days, 8:30 to 1. So if something comes up that on a Tuesday, Lindsay or Donna, who's also on my team, has to be out of the office for the afternoon, they've got that buffer to go, I can work Friday afternoon or I can make it up in the evening. But it was really important for me that from a perspective of the communication is the key to me when it comes to remote. They have to be able to get in touch with me at any time, really, because of the fact that I'm 17 years now recruiting. Lindsay's almost two, and Donna, she's been with us since December or November, sorry. And her background was more operational than it was what she's doing now. So I have to be available. And so we've set it up. We have Slack, we use Zoom. And so sometimes because we're not together, so Donna's 40 minutes in one direction, Lindsay's an hour in the other, and then there'd me, what we would call headquartered. And essentially what we do is sometimes we just all log on Zoom and nobody's really, we'll chat for a second. And then we get to what we're doing and no one's really talking, but we're all still right there. And then we use Slack, obviously email. We've had some different text things going on, but it's again that the availability has been really important. And then making sure that the systems that we have are the ones that they can have access to. And as I evolved in the last 3 years, because first it was like independent consultant Jen, and then it was like Jen needs some help. So now she's going to have somebody work for her who I was never a leader of people. Like I didn't have a team, I was on a team. And then when Donna joined us, it was more of, okay, how do I as the CEO, which I do the air quotes because it feels weird to
Yeah.
say that because if I think of CEOs, I think of those that were in the companies that we were at. So
Yep.
it was more of how do I buy back my time by having them doing things, but still be available to like coach and lead and develop them. But then I need someone to help coach and lead and develop me so I can trickle that down. So through the remote model, it has worked extremely well. I think Lindsay and I didn't meet in person for the first year that we worked together.
Oh, really? Yeah. No, I was going to ask
Yeah.
that because
Yeah.
have you actually planned on site? So like you meet up somewhere.
So when it was just Lindsay and I,
Yeah.
and not just, but when it was the two of us, again, everything was like, if I don't have it, she's got it. If she doesn't have it, like we were working safe. When you add someone else in, then it's okay. Who has it? Is it Lindsay? Is it Jen? Is it Donna? What does that all look like? So as we've been again growing and the recruitment has been growing as well, then we've been having conversation of, do we need to get together once a month where we just come together, we do a power session in the morning for 2 or 3 hours. We'll go to lunch, do some team building. Donna and I knew each other previously. So I've known Donna for about 6 years. And that was more of, hey, I have a need in my business. Are you interested? And if so, let's have conversation, which isn't always the way that I would recommend recruiting and hiring. That being said, there was quite a bit of established history between Donna and I that even if she said, I can do it for a year, that would have gotten us through where we needed to go. So we have been discussing as a team, do we want those days? And I think we will to some degree, but at the same time, it's worked really well to this point that nobody feels disconnected. And I've always said, if you guys want to take the drive and come to my place, you're more than welcome. If we need space because we need a whiteboard, then we'll rent one of the co-working spaces. But I think because communication is so important and that openness to like, I don't, I know it's my business and I started it and I created this vision, but without them, I could not have grown to the point that we are at now, where probably come September, October, there probably will be a need for someone else if we continue to trend in the direction that we're trending. But it's very important for me to say, what's important to you guys, right? How do we make this work? Because again, you don't want people coming into and this is my opinion, and you don't want people coming into an office that one, don't want to be there, and two, know that they're more productive at home.
Yeah.
And some people are, not everybody is. I know a few people that are like, well, I can't wait to get back to the office. And that's great. Our business model is not set up that way. And I can't see that it would be set up that way in terms of how Fusion would operate because we're not on site with our clients. We do everything remotely as well. If a client called today and said, Jen, we have interviews tomorrow and so it's not going to be able to make it, I would go in and sit on those interviews and I would go to their office space and but they wouldn't necessarily come to ours. So I don't feel the world is set up that way anymore. And I believe that if an individual can identify for themselves, I work better in this kind of environment, then that's the environment that we should try to find for them. Some people, it is an office environment. For me, it's home and it's worked really well because my husband, like I said, is a police officer. So there was not stability in terms of schedule for him. And so I was always the parent that someone's sick at school or daycare
Yep.
or so from that perspective, I already had a structure built around that flexibility. And I think that, in my opinion, that makes the company more attractive to those that are able to do it. Lindsay wouldn't be able to work for me if we worked out of an office in the city because she'd have to drive an hour each way every day. That's not productive either.
Yeah.
So,
There's no compelling reason to really be able
yeah.
to off to do that.
And
And
I,
I like the way that you're
sorry.
really centering it on your employees and
Yeah,
what works best to fuel your life because
absolutely.
you got location independence, you've got time flexibility as well too, where you're constantly factoring in the employees' opinions as well as what works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that to that point, that obviously they have supported the business growth and they're very integral. I think if we're looking at it from the performance perspective, if they weren't performing or if I was like, okay, we have to submit resumes today and it's 3 days and nobody knows where one of them are, those are different conversations. And then maybe it's not the fit for them. But I think because we've been, again, it's three of us. Three is not a crowd in this sense, right? And again, as you're adding people, you have to take those things into consideration. But the job is getting done and the clients are happy. Therefore, we're doing something right. And if we look at it, then we can audit and say what's working well, what would we change, and what we would do differently. But I want them to have a seat at the table to give their insights and their thoughts. And if Lindsay said, listen, I'm finding it really stressful to work from home right now, so I want to come in 2 days a week, then we would figure that out. She'd either come work here at the house or we would rent the space to do that. But I think when you have the ability to take the input from your team members and then they're open to how I am then giving that feedback, the remote piece just becomes the benefit, right? It just was really like they're doing it. And again, like I said, if I had clients going, I haven't heard from one of your recruiters in 2 weeks and I don't know why, that's an issue. And we would have to talk about that a little bit differently. But those ladies, I'll tell you, I sent a message. We have a kickoff meeting every Monday and yesterday I was preparing some stuff for it. And on Slack, I just dropped in. I was like, Lindsay, this is for the call tomorrow. Don't reply today, Sunday. Same thing for Donna. And they both replied. I'm like, it's Sunday. And they're like, it's Sunday for you too. And I'm like, I know, but like, this is my baby. And this is something I want to build. And I want to have them have the tools and resources they need for them to be successful because that just benefits the business. So I see it a little bit differently. I can also leave in the middle of the day if I wanted to come and have lunch with you if you were in town and know that they're still moving things forward. So I really respect and appreciate that about them because I could not be the size that we are today if it was just me.
Right.
It just couldn't. And I need to have team members that I can trust and that they can trust me. And again, like it was never an option that we would go rent office space. I could go get office space, but that is also probably over the course of a year enough for a salary for another person. So why wouldn't I do that?
Yeah, it makes
Right.
sense. Yeah.
And where we worked before, the building in Halifax is very large and very empty. Right. So what I got to me, it's just like, where can I better put revenue to reinvest back into the business? And the girls have everything they need. And as far as I know, that they're showing up every day and loving it. So I think that you have to be able to identify as a leader what's important to you. And then how do you communicate that downward and make sure that the people that are coming in feel the same way? And like I said, if anything changed, we'd shift that. But I don't know. The world is set up for this. The world was set up for this before COVID. We just didn't maximize it.
Right. And I think you come to it with a different perspective because you did this for 10 years beforehand. So
Right.
you have a different perspective than a business that was just created and you had no work from home experience at all. That this could be the future because you've already lived it for 10 years. So
Yeah,
this is where
absolutely.
you have a strategic advantage when you're actually doing your future focused planning. Finding
Yeah.
a different road. Is that office, that revenue, is that well investment? Is that a good
Mhm.
investment? Or is developing your staff and investing in your staff and upskilling and hiring for the skills that you
Right.
need, a better investment. And personally, I agree with you. That's the better investment rather than an
Yeah.
office.
For me, it's always going to be my people. And I don't say that from an ownership perspective. I just mean like my team is, again, how I, I'm at a point now where I have a business coach and he has been like, you have to look at some of the tasks that you don't need to be done by you. Like you have to look at what are your $20 tasks and your $50 tasks and your whatever. And we've gone through that some of it as an audit. And if you're better out doing X, Y, and Z, then you need to be doing that and leaving it with your team. And so for me, that was a very hard shift for me because I didn't have a team before. Like I didn't go, okay, you go check references, you go do this. So that I felt guilty for a very long time. I should be doing this because it's my business and it's those. But as it's come to evolve and I've worked through those challenges with myself of what am I afraid of? And it was not giving up control. In fact, it was more of, I feel bad because it's work that I can do and I know how to do. So why am I giving it to someone else? But it also then allows me to have conversations like this and talk about the brand and what's important. It also allows me to talk with clients, figure out Again, I don't typically just talk with someone and say, here's an accounting role we're hiring for. Here's the job description. What's your fee? And then I go off to it. I'm helping them strategically not work myself out of a job, but give them enough tool and resources that if they did not use us in the future, they would have enough of a foundation that they could replicate on their own. They probably would still come to us because of the time that it takes, but I'm giving them more than bodies in that
Right.
regard. So I really come to accept that as a CEO. And again, that still feels very weird to me because that's not ever how I saw it. As a CEO, I have to go, where do I maximize my time? How do I empower my people? And how do we just continue to create what I think has been really incredible momentum for the fact that we aren't all close in proximity. And then as the business continues to grow, maybe we'll have recruiters or support staff or what have you that don't even sit inside Nova Scotia.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I think when we talk about remote, and this is something I wanted to add into another part of the conversation, I think 90% of the world's work can be done remotely. Now, obviously, if it's someone that works in a factory, probably can't be done. I
Yes.
also believe that when I look at the roles that we hire for, and if I'm wrong, I would love feedback on that. But I truly believe that when risk and compliance are an issue or a potential issue, those are, if I'm looking at accounting and legal and things like that, there's a lot of really sensitive information and a lot of proprietary information that falling into the wrong hands isn't always right. So at least if I was accounting, I'd be
Yeah.
like, I'm going to keep those files over here. Because for me, again, that risk and compliance factor is an issue. Not to say that it can't be done, but we had a paralegal roles that we were hiring for last year, and they're like, "I want to work from home." And I'm like, "These are legal files. Like, and you can't. They have to be like there's a process, and there's like this compliance thing that you have to follow." And I'm not saying that it
Yeah.
can't be. We're comfortable with it,
Regulatory
right?
too, right? Because I come from a
Exactly.
regulatory background as well too.
Yes.
I get that. I people
Yeah.
people read about that all the time. So I can completely support that because it's not even something you as a company necessarily have control over if there's a big regulatory body involved. So it
Right.
really has to
Yeah.
be what fuels the work, what supports the work, what the reality of the work is. And the truth is, not every single person can actually work 100% remote, or there are specific tasks that have to be on-centric, right? Depending on
Hmm.
the work. And that's where I think that there's too much generalization. And that's where the
Absolutely.
personalization becomes really important, right?
Yeah.
As a
Absolutely.
leader, as an executive, you have to understand the work that people do for you, the tasks that are involved, and how do you find the sweet spot of where you're going to be able to build up that intrinsic motivation, that autonomy,
Mhm.
that mastery, right? But then balance out the realities of that work. And that's
Yeah.
really the strategic, intentional design of work will help you recruit the right people into those particular roles. And that's, I
Yeah.
think, we're doing. And it's funny to me because like you're doing it instinctively, right? And obviously
Right.
you get advice and you've had your dad and your business coach and all that stuff when you're doing that. But you're pulling from all the aspects of what we learned over 10 years and
Right.
really creating something that's got that solid foundation, but it's really future focused. And that's
Absolutely. And I think too, I do have really great people in my corner that will give me advice and will give me kind of insights. And like my business coach is amazing. My dad's been fantastic. I've got some really solid friends in business that I've looked to. I think one of the things that, again, going back to that self awareness piece of myself and that authenticity is I'm going to ask and I'm going to try to gather as much information as I can. But at the end of the day, I go with my gut in
Mhm.
terms of do I think this will work for me? And then how does it potentially work or impact other people? And I'll look at it objectively, but I would say probably why the CEO thing still feels weird and the fact that this is actually a company and all of those things is because I just get up every day and was just like, I'm just going to do stuff I love. And if I don't love it, I'm going to say no. And at the beginning, I didn't because it was like you said yes to everything because it was income. But now, like, we're very selective. And so the fact that I go, if this doesn't feel aligned to me, then we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
And that's very empowering, and and then I can then empower Lindsay and Donna, who between the 2 of them don't even have 5 years experience in recruitment, but they're crushing it. Like we get fantastic feedback from our clients. Like they love our client too. So there's something about tapping into their own authenticity that has allowed them to like start to thrive in these roles. And then
Yeah.
we'll add in like leadership and development and what have you, because I follow a lot of Gary Vaynerchuk. And one of the things that Gary Vaynerchuk says, and I love, and I'm a huge fan of his, like I send his videos to my son all the time, is that if somebody, two things to that is if somebody does so well in your company and then they leave, instead of being angry about it, just feel really proud about the fact that this was a stepping stone for them. They took what they needed and they're going to grow. And then the other part that what he always says is stop trying to do things that you're not good at. Find the things you are good at and triple down on them. And from that perspective, like I truly believe that. I think I feel very confident when I'm talking. I love talking to people. I love learning about business, which is why I think recruitment became a natural fit for me because I like what's your business like versus my business? How do you do it differently than this person? I find all that fascinating. And those are conversations I get to have every day. So that's why it doesn't feel like work. And I would hope that as Donna and Lindsay grow and evolve in their role, that one, they don't feel like it's work for them. And two, if they ultimately decided that the fusion group wasn't going to be their home anymore, that where they go, they've been able to say, this was an incredible experience. I learned so much. I gained so much value. And that relationship, it might be finished in terms of a working relationship, but the integrity of that as it moves forward, like they're always going to remember that.
You're
Like
bringing
that's
in
what's
another
important to me.
podcast episode. I did a
There
whole
we go.
episode about alumni networks. And so that's essentially the idea of an alumni is when you first bring an employee on, they're an employee for life, really. You
Right.
train, you teach them, and then they leave because, they have a different dream than you have.
Right.
But when they leave, it's not like they've left your ecosystem. They stay in touch. They refer people back to you and you've built this
Absolutely.
network. And that's incredibly useful in recruitment because the people that will stand up for you and say your name and room
Mhm.
don't have access
Yes.
to
Love
this
that.
something in network, right?
Absolutely.
That's
100%. And a perfect story for that is so before I was with the company I was with that we were together for 10 years, I worked for a telecommunications company for 2 years before that. And I recruited for a gentleman who was the VP of sales for the telecommunications company. And we were hiring like retail door knockers, customer service, all these things. And everyone had said to me, oh, he's really tough to work for. He's really hard. He's really hard. And we ended up having a great relationship. And I recruited for him for one of the 2 years that I was at this company. And I have recruited for him more now since I've been on my own. I'm so glad that you're done where you were and
yeah,
you're on your own. Now I can use you again. And that was literally 10 years from the time we had worked together before to now. And we've done a number of recruitment for him over the last 3 years. And it's again, I'm very much, some people might say, oh, that's an acquaintance. But I really believe in the value of those relationships. I'm in touch with almost everyone that I worked with at the company we were with before
yeah,
inside of that. And it's been very positive because I think the relationships are what drives so much more forward. And I don't know that I would not have ever guessed that we didn't overlap when we were where we were, but that we
yeah,
were having this conversation today.
yeah,
And so I think that there's tremendous value in all of those pieces. And I think that they're really important.
yeah.
It's relationships, right? It
Yeah.
really is. You don't know where someone's going to land in 5 years,
No,
right? Or
and
how you
honestly,
can help someone in 5 years.
yeah, like I'm connected to 900 people from that company that we work with. And it's I keep those people on my, even though I don't necessarily chat with them all the time, but I want to see what my network looks like in 10 years when all of those seeds kind of get
Yeah.
going because it's like all of a sudden then you're connected to 1,000 more people that
I
you
call it the spider web, right? Like we
exactly.
do on
Right.
Thursdays. On Thursdays, I host a weekly career strategy call. So it's like it's open to anybody. Come by, hang out. Don't talk if you don't want, like whatever. But it's basically there's no agenda. You come and if you have a question, like I have an interview and I'm nervous about how to answer this question, or hey, what's wrong with my LinkedIn or what have you. So we have this and it has grown. I think a couple of weeks ago we had 57 people that attended, right? From at the beginning, it was just me and Lindsay. And we were like, let's see who shows up. And the first week, nobody showed up. And then we kept doing it. But then what ends up, and I talked to them and saying, your network becomes a spider web, especially if you're using the platform of LinkedIn. And if you are working remotely, you need to be leveraging that platform even more than anyone else because of the fact that you need to stay connected so that you feel like you're not missing things, right? Or just feeling fresh in terms of the information. But it is literally if I comment on something on your LinkedIn and then five other people see it that are not even in my network, like it just continues to expand
Yeah.
and expand. And again, I've been recruiting for a very long time. So LinkedIn I was using back in like 2011 before people were really using it. And so I have over 12,000 connections currently. And that is, I think, what has allowed us to, again, we can go out and put out a post and say, we're looking for an accounting person or a salesperson or whatever. And someone is going to reach out and be like, Jen, you need to talk to this person, or let me connect you with, because we keep that going, and the spider web of it becomes, it just gets bigger and bigger. And it's not 6 degrees of separation anymore.
No,
It
really
really isn't.
isn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's exciting to me. I love that.
I do too. It's my
Anyways,
favorite part of it.
we are at time. So we
Okay.
can keep going forever and ever.
Yeah,
Uh,
I can do that.
is there anything that we didn't cover that you just want to quickly add in there?
I think what I would say is, I mean, we've talked a lot about recruitment, but I would say that one of the things around like career strategy where I think is really important for those that are listening, when it's whether you want a remote role or you want to go back into the office or you want to change or you want to figure out those things. A lot of people don't know where to start and they feel very overwhelmed and say, I got to go back to school or I'm stuck where I am. And I say to everybody, everything you need, you already have. And I believe that 80% of what you need, you do already have. And the other 20% is talking to someone objectively who can give you that clarity and that confidence to help you make a decision. If we can help, we are more than happy to do. But I always say, just go outside your meet. Don't go to a spouse or a family member, because again, their goal is to protect you from change, because change is scary. But have a conversation with a former colleague or a peer or a leader or something like that, that you can just work through some of those thoughts. Because if you do want to make a change, and again, I know a lot of people that come and say, I only want to work remote, and that's great. And if we have a client that has that, then we will work towards that and to help someone. But you have to be able to be like really honest with yourself about what's important. And then how do you gain some clarity by someone who can be objective and give you direction or give you a plan, or just go, you need to read this book. Sometimes it's just that you need to listen to this podcast. You need to what have you, because I truly believe that, like I said to you before we started recording, I don't have a university degree. I've got work experience and I have some kind of skill sets that are valuable and important that allowed me to piggyback off of them until I could get to where I am. But if you had told me in 1993 when I finished high school that I would be sitting where I am today without that traditional go to school, go to university, do this, work your way up, it on paper, it doesn't make sense. And so sometimes the best success stories are those that don't make any sense. And you
Yeah.
can't write them out on paper that way.
Yeah.
And that would be my takeaway, is if something's burning inside of you to make a change or explore more or figure something out, explore it and have that conversation with someone who isn't emotionally attached to the outcome of your decision, because they're going to be protective of you. And what's rightfully, my husband said to me, take that job as the branch manager. It's like, it's too risky otherwise. I'm like, I just gave 10 years. There's nothing stable about corporate anymore. I have to take this risk. I've got to take this jump. And if I asked him now, do you wish I'd taken another job? I can guarantee, based on the way that things have changed and evolved for us financially, that he would have been like, I can't imagine what you would have done there.
Yeah. And that's
So
the thing.
explore that.
Working corporate has a salary cap. Working for
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. And if you want me to share, I'm happy to share. And then if you decide that you don't, you can cut it out. But I was at the company that we were with. I was on a base salary. My base salary was 72,600. And then I had a 10% annual bonus. So my total package, just in terms of compensation, was $80,000. And I doubled that in the first year on my own in the middle of the pandemic with
Wow.
no employees. And again, and we've only grown up since then. So you're right when you say salary does cap. And for some people, that's okay. That's 100%. But if you have the itch, then you need to explore it and see where it takes you. Maybe it takes you nowhere, but then at least you don't have the regret of, I should have tried this then. And if I had taken that job that was offered to me in the middle of the pandemic and did the safe thing, I'd still be scratching the itch, and I'd probably be pretty agitated by those that kind of were trying to coax me in that direction. Because now I see what I've been able to build, and we're not slowing down. Like, we have so many epic things in the pipeline of what we're working on that are to continue to disrupt and do things differently. And that's what I would want for other people as well.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And I think it's great that you're being so transparent about this already. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
that's cool.
I'm open book.
All right. Perfect. We will make sure that people have your LinkedIn and
Sure.
your websites, and they know how to get a hold of you if they want to hear more of your story and take advantage of your service.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely. I'm happy to. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing.
My